Thanks for reading that passage, Maddie. There's a lot of names and a lot of funny words, too. We have now come to the 5th chapter of Daniel. And as you know, I've mentioned before, we're visiting the book of Daniel, and we're only going halfway through. There are 12 chapters, but we're going to end with chapter 6. So next week will be our last chapter or sermon on Daniel. But chapter 5 of Daniel is a very interesting one. It is the one where it comes to the end of the rule of Babylon. If you track from chapter 1 through 5, just give you a brief recap. Chapter 1 is where Daniel and his friends and many other people from Judah are taken from their country. They are displaced, and their names are changed. They are brought into this place called Babylon. It is a real colonial travesty, right, is what was happening. They deported everyone from their homes. And not only that, they tried to feed them their food, their culture, but Daniel and his friends refused. They remembered who they were, that they were worshipers of God, the God of Israel. But they were moving into a space where they worshiped many other gods. And of course, the adventures that will happen then in chapter 2 and chapter 3, in chapter 4, you have the fiery furnace. In chapter 3, chapter 2 had the dream that he had to interpret. And the last week was another dream of Nebuchadnezzar, the great king of Babylon, who has this dream of a great tree. And he, because of his pride, is brought low and finally honors the God of heaven, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That is the story. But we come to what is seen as one of his sons. In fact, historically, Belshazzar is actually about a couple of generations later. But in between, they killed each other, stuff like this, for the throne. Because what happened with Nebuchadnezzar's success, all his subsequent heirs were not great. Let's put it that way. And Babylon begins to fall apart. And long story short, what brings us to this chapter, there is a massive change. And before this, right before this change happens, on that same night, according to this particular scripture, a hand appears and writes on the wall. So whenever you know, if you know the English idiom, the writing's on the wall. This is exactly where it's from. Something is going to happen is what writing on the wall means. Something is going to happen. Now, they see this disembodied hand. I know Halloween's coming, but don't be scared. They were scared. They freak out because who sees a disembodied hand, one? And two, what is it writing on the wall? And so it freaks this king out, this descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. And he calls all his, diviners, all the shamans, the people who should know what's going on. And they go, I don't know. And so they freak out even more because no one knows what's going on until the queen says, there is a fellow that your father knew, who served under your father, who is the head of all the wise people of your land. He is, and in her words, is someone who has the wisdom of the gods. Because they did not recognize really the God of heaven, Yahweh, the God of the Jewish people, the God that we worship as the only God. They were worshipers of other idols. And they call him to interpret what is written on all. This is a famous Rembrandt painting of this here, less famous painting, but here's Daniel now explaining to him. And here's some things you need to know as they set up what is happening. Remember, Belshazzar, and we mean the king here, the descendant of Nebuchadnezzar, he's not the same as Belteshazzar, which is the name that they gave Daniel, but it means the same thing. It's the worship of the god Bel. Daniel never goes by that name himself. and you'll see the names sort of interchange. But the king had taken the golden goblets that were in the temple of God in Jerusalem, and those are sacred items, and they began to party with them, is what's happening that night, which is a disrespect. And not only did they do that, they did it in their worship, as a part of their worship, to their gods, to their idols. Now, no one today is going to go and, take the chalice that we have here, and go party in front of false gods, right? Because, first of all, we don't have false gods. Or do we? What are false gods? They are the things that we rely on, that we think that we can rely on to get through life. They are those coping mechanisms that we use to make ourselves feel better, especially when we're stressed out or when we're anxious. These are our false gods. But as Belshazzar worshipped these false gods with the God of heaven's implements that were used to worship him, this hand appeared. And long story short, that very night, Darius the Mede, and the Medes and the Persians, they will overthrow Babylon. And we're told that Belshazzar is killed that night. But he does so, this happens after he thanks Daniel and says, "Great job. Thanks for interpreting this. You've been weighed, you've been measured, and you have been found wanting." This is what it says. You've been weighed, you've been measured, you've been found wanting. And he says it's okay. It doesn't scare him. But that night, there's a change in the regime. According to history, Babylon had fallen so low that the Babylonians practically welcomed the Persians to walk in and take over. Things were run so poorly in the Babylonian kingdom, at least according to one of the historians. But what can we learn about this? I want to take a little bit of a turn, because the question I want to ask now is, what's up with Daniel? What is he doing? He served Nebuchadnezzar, the greatest king of the Babylonian Empire, and now he's serving his son. But here's the interesting part. Daniel was always a worshiper of God alone. Even though they say, "Oh, we know that you have the wisdom of the gods," right? So you know things, so can you tell us? And what he responds is this. He says, "The Most High God, the one true God." He doesn't use the word untrue, he says the Most High God. So in a way he's saying, okay, I have to finesse my way through here a little bit, but he's going to say, you know what? The Most High God is now the ruler of all things. So he's sort of navigating his way, but he gives credit where it's due. It's not his wisdom. And in chapter 2, when he's dealing with Nebuchadnezzar, the great king of Babylon, he says, "This is not me. I can't interpret your dreams, but the Most High God knows. And he is the one who's sending you this message. And this is the message." So he is a person who has served over actually several regimes. And here's a spoiler alert. When we get to chapter 6, which is the last chapter we're going to visit, he is going to continue to serve not only the Babylonian Empire, he is going to serve in the Persian Empire. This is not often done. If you think about it, if there's a takeover, everyone gets cleaned out. But not Daniel. And the question is why? So here's what I'm thinking about, and what this passage brings to us. There are regime changes in our lives. There's a a great regime change recently in this very building. I was here this afternoon at 1 o'clock for the installation of our dear friend Sam Vu, Reverend Sam Vu, who is now the head pastor of this church. There was a change. And there's a lot of excitement here because things are going to be different. Or there's some new things that are going to happen. But change is not always positive in that way. Regime change. And maybe for the Babylonians, they're going, oh yes, please change our government. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of political stuff that happens. But what happens in your life in terms of change? I want you to think about something that's happening in your life right now that is changing. Did you get a new job? Did you start a new school? Are there new relationships that are happening? And I want to ask a question, and that is, what is your occupation? What are you doing? And what I mean by occupation is, I don't mean a job. I mean, what is it you're doing? If you're a student, that's your occupation. Does that make sense? If you're traveling the world, that is your current occupation, okay? That's what you're doing. But what is it that you do from day to day right now, currently? And what does faithfulness look like? Because Daniel had a job during the whole regime of the Babylonian Empire from Nebuchadnezzar forward. And then he will have one during this time of change. His character stays pretty much the same in his faithfulness. So I want to ask you to just turn to someone next to you right now, or if they know you too well, find someone else, because they already know, yeah, you're my mom, you're my dad, I know what you do. Find someone who probably doesn't know what you do, and tell them what you, maybe gather in groups of 3, if you can, 4 at most. So I'm going to give you a moment. You can take this seat, change them around, and stay in these groups for this while. If you're taking notes, take your notebook with you, because we're going to move around a little bit in this service. So go for it. Find 2 or 3 other people. Have a chat. You can cross the aisle, move around, move the chairs. No, not to worry. I will accept groups of 2 as well if you want to just have a smaller group. But no more than 4, because 4 is, that's a lot. So if you have 4, maybe divide to 2. Yeah? No more than 4. If you got an extra, break off and have a 2. Have we got everyone sorted out? Okay. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to tell people what you do. What is your occupation? What preoccupies you from day to day right now? Go for it. And it may help to tell them what you do while you're doing the things that you do. So just don't say student. Tell them what you study. Tell them where you go to class. Tell them what it feels like. Are most of you on the last person yet? Yes, mostly, yes? Okay. Hopefully you're winding down. Have we gotten everyone in this group too? Yep, we're good. Okay. Everyone stay where you are. You just told everyone what you do from day to day, your occupation, what occupies your time. But I'm going to shift gears here, because remember we're talking about Daniel. Daniel, who's held his job position probably for decades now, through several kings, particularly Nebuchadnezzar the Great one, and now Belshazzar, who's going to be the last one. And, spoiler alert, he's going to serve Darius. But you notice how the queen talks about him. He is considered a really helpful person. So I dug this off of the internet, It's what makes a good person to work with, and what makes a bad person to work with. You can kind of and ask yourself, which traits are you encountering, either in yourself or in someone else? Because here's the thing, even if you find yourself in this place, maybe it's about time to figure out you need a change. There's a new regime. We're not talking about overthrowing a kingdom, but perhaps we are. It's about a disruption in your own life. But here's the other part of this thing. It's not just about the changes needed. It's about what do you aspire towards in some of these. Now, this is a secular poster, by the way, okay, just to let you know. But some of them are very helpful, like good health habits as poor health habits. And these are pretty obvious, right? But here's the thing. I've worked with people on both sides of this. And sometimes I think I've been on both sides of this. You know what I mean? And it's a good sort of just measure for me sometimes, like, oh man, there are things that I need to learn to improve in. I need help. And then there's other aspects in which I'm going, okay, I think I can be this. I can do this. I can be that encourager. I can be that helpful person. I can be a person who tries to accept change, right? That person. And then to understand where we are in our current occupation, what you're doing today, can you move into a place where when people mention your name in the workplace, it's not like, oh, it's that person on the left side. And instead it's like, oh, it's that person on the right side. The person who actually adds a sort of different atmosphere to the place. So that even generations later, the queen of Belshazzar remembers the story of Daniel. His character is known. Even though they may not know them personally, there is a reputation. Now here's the interesting part. As Christians, we don't do this for our own gain or pride. Remember what Daniel says. Belshazzar promises to make that person rich. Going to hang a chain around their neck, I don't know, they're rappers or something kind of thing. But he says, I'm going to make you a third highest ruler. I mean, they're getting a promotion in a huge way. But remember what Daniel says. He says, keep your promotion. Keep your gold chains. Give it to someone else. He's not interested. His integrity is intact. He doesn't do what he does for money. He doesn't do what he does for fame. He doesn't do it so that he can prop himself up. He does it because there's something else that's going on inside him, that this is his passion, this is what he does, this is who he is. In bringing life to other people or telling the truth. And how fearlessly he says, look, this is about you. You have been weighed and you have been found wanting. Your kingdom is coming to an end. He's not afraid to speak the truth in his place of work. But he's faithfully serving still this kingdom of Babylon. In your place of work, in your place of occupation, whether it's school or wherever you're called to, the way that you travel the world, if that's what you're occupied with, whatever endeavor you're currently in, when people encounter you, does their day become better or worse? Now, there's some occupations where this is a difficult thing, right? Like, I hear about law enforcement, and they say they meet people on the worst day of their lives, right? But what can they do to make things better? I was talking to another friend who worked at pretty much a complaints department. Everyone who comes is upset. Right? They're going like, oh, this is bad. What's wrong with your company? This is terrible. And they found that at first it was destroying them. It was just horrible. They had to hear these complaints. People are angry. Say, where's your manager? Why are you not helping me? But they actually ended up thanking God for this position because they said it helped them grow a thicker skin, and they began to work on helping the person. And when they worked on helping the person, said, yes, I understand you might be upset about this, but let's try to find a way forward. There are things I can do, and there are things I can't do. And this doesn't mean that everyone's going to be happy with you. But there were moments where they could see the person's demeanor actually change. From being angry, frustrated, being on the phone for hours or whatever it is, they would come to their desk, and after they say, let me try to help you. We might not be able to resolve this quickly, but let's find out the steps. And the person begins to understand that you're not a part of a faceless, kind of organization. But you're someone who hears me. You are someone who's trying to help me to move forward. Now, you might not have that person's job, and maybe you don't want that person's job. But you have an occupation. And sometimes, even say being a parent. Wow, the complaints department in that place piles up. Right? But whatever it is that you do, are you bringing life to it? Are you speaking truth into it? And are you known for integrity? So the question I want you now to talk to each other about is, in the occupation that you just talked about, what is one thing? Maybe just pick one. What does faithfulness look like in your occupation for you on a daily level? Right? And it could be something simple. Don't try to overthink it. Like, for example, if you're making rivets, it's making the best rivet you can make, right, kind of thing. Now, I don't know. I don't think there's anyone making rivets here. But whatever it is, what does it mean for you to be faithful? To be on that right side, per se, no matter who you encounter. So, I'm going to send you off again. Have that chat. Think about it. What can you do in your occupation, whether it's traveling the world, whether it's in an office, whether it's working with people, whether it's in healthcare, whether you're teaching? What does faithfulness look like in which people will say, my day is better because of what you are doing? Let's go for that. So in your conversations of what faithfulness looks like, it's going to be very unique, I think, to each person. But there's also similarities. There can be similarities of attitudes and so on, but it's going to be very specific in terms of how it's going to be happening in terms of its steps. And I would say, try to bring these questions home or to your occupation, right? Bring it with you after this and continue to think about it. What does it mean for me to make this place, or the place where I work, the places where I play, the places where I'm engaged with other people, how am I salt and light? How can I make it better? Now, it's not all on you, okay? I want you to be clear about that. It's not like, I am going to save the world. I'm going to save my company. I'm going to save, my school. It's more towards, what is God wanting of this place? How can it be better? And an exodus from a place, or a change in regime itself, in this story with Daniel, was what happened. And Daniel was swept up along with it, as we'll see. But no matter what regime he was under, no matter what kind of king he was under, because now it's no longer Nebuchadnezzar, he was doing his work faithfully. For people who did not worship his God, who had a different culture, who perhaps, for all intents and purposes, were the enemies of his people. Like, they're the ones who deported him. They're the ones who took over and tried to change everything he had. And yet he thrived. I mean, this is like an immigrant story, except he was deported, right? It's not as simple as I'm going to a better world. It's like, I don't want to go there. And he was dragged there, but he made the best that he could, given the really difficult circumstances that he faced. And the one thing that we know about Daniel is he remained faithful to God, and he remained faithful to the people around him. I will guarantee you that the story does not tell half of it as to how hard it was. It wasn't easy. And next week we're going to find out how much more difficult it gets. I mean, his friends did get thrown into a furnace, so, it wasn't easy. But I want you to do one more thing together as a group. And that is to share this. Who in your world needs to know God's love? Who in your world? Who in your occupation? Who are you encountering? And here, I want to say this first. Sometimes that person who needs to know God's love, and this is important, and we're about to be reminded of it, if the person who needs to know God's love first is me. If you don't feel like God loves you, in that moment when you're with Jesus in the imaged prayer, he doesn't have anything good to say to you, then there is something amiss. It's about accepting the love of God. And I want to be honest that sometimes even for myself, it's hard to believe that God would love me. Sometimes we feel alone. Sometimes we feel ignored. Or sometimes we feel like the things we've done are not enough. But that's not what God is looking for. In a world where people are always judging someone, it's not about a performance report. It's about someone's actual character. Who in your world needs to know that God made them, that God loves them no matter what they've done, where they've been, and where they feel like they are? Who needs to hear you say no? Who needs you to show them that God loves them? He really does. So I'm going to ask you to share in your groups one last time. Just one name, at least one name. If there's a group of people that you're thinking about, just say their names. They don't need to know who they are, because we may not have the time for that. If you're interested, have that conversation with each other. But name the names of those who are in your world, or the person in your world who really needs to know the love of Jesus. And if you're brave enough, sometimes the name you name is your own. Is your own. So, with tenderness towards one another, with an understanding, would you share with one another the person in your world who truly needs to know the love of God? So go and share and be brave. And hopefully you're until the last person in your group. You've been able to share the names of those. So Daniel's story gives us, I don't know what change is going on in your life. That might be something worth sharing too. But you might be encountering new things. But you can be faithful where you are. So we always wind up with these three ideas. The identity is the first. Is know what you're called to do. Like if you're on that slide with the right and the left side, if you're finding that what your current occupation is on that left side and is just full of that, maybe you need to have a conversation with someone. Maybe you need to ask God to open new doors, a new way of being or doing, or to what you're called to. But if you know what you're called to, and it's something you're established in already in the here and now, and that gives you life and light, that's a really important thing. To know this is what God calls you to at this season in your life. That's important. And lean into that and accept that. Be faithful in what you do, or at least the best that you can, knowing that there is grace for this, that there is space to learn. And the hope is that through this process, you make other people's lives better because you know why you're there. Not for the money. It's not for the fame. It's not, for the accolades. You're there with a deeper purpose and an understanding, what it is that you're doing. And finally, your mission. All the names that you name, my hope is that you will bring those names home. And as you've shared them, it'd be nice if we began to share with each other, these are the people I want to be praying for in my life. These are the people who need to know the love of God. And there's also one last thing. There's a bit of a trick question too to this. When I mentioned that sometimes the name that we have to name first, or have the courage to name as our own, I'm going to tell you the truth. That you never stop praying for that. For yourself. But more than that, we need to invite each other. When we pray for each other, that's what we're praying for. When you name one another, when you see each other in these groups, it's about the depth of knowing God's love in a real way for each of us. So we need to be praying for ourselves, and we need to be praying for each other. And my hope is that this Daniel's life, his faithfulness through regimes, through changes, through life itself and all its ups and downs, will be things that we navigate as well in what we're called to. Let's pray together. And let me pray this over you. I thank God that we have people we can talk to. But I pray that it will be more than just for a few minutes. I pray that you will have people to pray with. And most of all, I pray this. That in your world, in your life, you're far apart, no matter what you've gone through, no matter what you do, you'll recognize that you love God unequivocally. Let's